Welcome back, Defenders. Today, Donald Trump and Putin held a 2-hour phone conversation. What did they talk about? Putin urges West to end military support for Ukraine as he orders a temporary ceasefire on energy sites. So a 2-hour phone conversation, and Donald Trump, the master negotiator, the art of the deal, after giving Russia all of these concessions. The United States will never put boots on the ground. Ukraine can't join NATO. Russia gets to keep all the territory they've taken. And all diplomatic relations between the United States and Russia will be normalized. And in return, Trump wants Putin to want peace. Let's be nice to the Russians, and maybe they'll stop killing people. And all he got was a temporary ceasefire in the air on energy sites. So here's the press release put out. But this is nonsense. This is spin. The goal of this conversation was to get a 30-day ceasefire across the entire front lines. This is what Ukraine agreed to after the United States cut off all military support and intelligence sharing to force Ukraine to offer this 30-day interim ceasefire across the front lines. And Russia rejected it. Putin rejected it. So there's two different versions of this conversation coming out. There's what the Kremlin is saying, and then there's what the Trump administration is saying. So for the Russians, they're talking up a prisoner exchange that'll happen tomorrow, 175 for 175, but Russia does prisoner exchanges anyways. They're also claiming they'll return 23 seriously wounded Ukrainian service members. But once again, they're POWs. They should be returned anyways. Putin responded positively to the initiative on the mutual refusal of the parties to the conflict in Ukraine from strikes on energy infrastructure for 30 days. So this is not a ceasefire in the air. It's a ceasefire in the air on Ukraine's energy infrastructure and Russia's oil and gas industry. Trump supported Putin's idea to organize hockey matches between the United States and Russia. These will be NHL and KHL teams playing against each other. So American athletes get to compete against war criminals. Great. The Kremlin called the key condition for resolving the conflict by peaceful means a complete cessation of military aid and intelligence to Ukraine, and the Russians demand that basically Ukraine stop mobilizing men into their military. That's what the Russians are saying. What is the Trump administration saying? And Russia and the United States are going to talk some more in the Middle East coming up soon. Trump and Putin agreed that the movement towards peace will begin with this energy infrastructure ceasefire. And Putin and Trump stressed the need to improve bilateral relations between these two great nations. I'm sorry, I have to read it. This is the tweet that Trump put out. And this is actually pretty mild. This is pretty tame. This actually indicates to me that Trump was disappointed in this phone conversation, but he still has to spin it because Trump has put all his chips on Russia. My phone conversation today with President Putin of Russia was a very good and productive one. We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure, with an understanding that we will be working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to this very horrible war between Russia and Ukraine. This war would have never started if I were president. Many elements of a contract for peace were discussed, including the fact that thousands of prisoners or thousands of soldiers are being killed, and both Putin and Zelensky would like to see it end. That process is now in full force and effect, and we will hopefully, for the sake of humanity, get the job done. So what was Putin's response to this phone conversation with Trump? And as soon as he hung up the phone, he launched drones to attack Ukraine. Okay, maybe he won't target any energy or infrastructure, but is Russia still allowed to blow up apartment buildings? Blow up hospitals and churches and coffee shops? Like, how does this benefit Ukraine if Russia in the air is still allowed to bomb and target civilians? civilian cities. Putin seeks to prolong Ukraine peace talks to his advantage, according to experts. So yes, I think Putin wants to drag out the illusion that he can be talked into some kind of ceasefire or peace, and he's just going to string Donald Trump along. I actually do think the Russians might agree to a total 30-day ceasefire in the month of May. I think Putin might actually want a pause in the conflict so that he can have a grand military parade on May 9th. Russia is basically a cult to celebrate their victory in World War II, and the Russians pretend like nothing else happened in the last 80 years. Just their victory in 1945, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and has to defeat the Nazis of the West again. We might get a total ceasefire, but I think it's only when Russia will think it's convenient for them, and they will immediately break it as soon as they think it's to their benefit. Trump administration weighs recognizing Crimea as Russian territory. Yes, I think at some point in the next couple weeks, Donald Trump unilaterally is just going to start recognizing Ukraine's territory as belonging to Russia. Reality on the ground, Waltz, this is the National Security Advisor, insists Ukraine needs to cede territory for security guarantees. Repeating Kremlin talking points, top U.S. security advisor suggests that much of Novorossiya would go to Russia in any deal, while Zelensky says Putin is just prolonging the war. Here's the map. This is what Putin recently claimed Novorossiya, New Russia, is an integral part of Russia, and Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov defined these oblasts as being Novorossiya. So the Russians have failed on the battlefield to take this territory by force, and they want Donald Trump to just give it to them. Force Ukraine somehow force Ukraine to give up all these territories, all these people, so that Russia can have the entire Black Sea coastline. They want Mykolaiv and Odessa so they can link up with Moldova. They're going to take Moldova and maybe even parts of Romania to get up to the Carpathian Mountains. This is the gap right here that the Russians want to close. So this is never going to happen. Ukraine has declared this is their red line. Putin wants all weapon aid to Ukraine halted for a Trump truce. Not American weapons. They want all weapons from all NATO partners to stop crossing the border to help Ukraine. And they want Russian observers in the ports in Odessa and on the Polish border to enforce it, to make sure that no new weapons are getting into Ukraine. On top of this, they're saying Ukraine's not allowed to mobilize any more men. They're not allowed to expand the size of their military. This isn't going to happen. It's not going to happen. Meanwhile, Trump keeps giving concessions to Putin when Putin hasn't given anything up. U.S. to withdraw from group investigating Russian leadership for crimes against Ukraine. The U.S. has privately told European officials that it is pulling back from an international group investigating Russian leaders for crimes of aggression committed against Ukraine. So there's the word that Donald Trump will never use. According to Trump, Ukraine started this war. Zelensky is a dictator. Russia has been entirely justified with all the crimes they've committed the last 3 years. The last 11 years. And I guess Putin is giving Trump something. Putin authorizes U.S. hedge fund to buy Russian securities. I don't think this was discussed in the phone call, but through back channels, Trump is communicating to the Russians, we want American hedge funds, American investors on Wall Street, investing in Russia again. So the new decree from Putin permits 683 Capital Partners LP to buy Russian companies' securities from 6 U.S.-based and 4 UK-based and 1 Singaporean investment fund. This is U.S. capital flowing back into Russia for the first time in 3 years. And this is giving confidence to international investors. If you're an Indian or a Chinese or a Saudi investor, the Americans are returning to the Russian markets. So it's safe for us to do it as well. Investors return Russian assets as Trump and Putin get closer. And this is causing the ruble to strengthen. Ruble strengthens to its highest level since June of 2024 in response to these Trump and Putin peace talks. So the ruble has strengthened by 40% since December, 4 months ago, basically. All of the progress we were making towards an economic collapse of Russia, Donald Trump is currently undoing it on purpose. And this is contradictory to what ordinary Americans want. I understand that for most voting Americans, Ukraine might not be in their top 5 issues. They might care more about other domestic or political issues in America. But Americans still have an opinion on Russia and Ukraine. And a majority of Americans support Ukraine, and they believe that Donald Trump is on the side of Russia. Here's the polling data when you ask this question. Where are your sympathies concerning this war between Russia and Ukraine? And 61% of Americans have sympathy towards Ukraine, while only 2% have sympathy towards Russia. This is the 2% that Donald Trump is currently speaking to and serving. 35% say neither. From what you've seen, heard, and read about, where do you think Trump's sympathies are? And 49% of Americans believe that Trump has more sympathy to Russia. Only 8% believe he actually cares about Ukraine. And Donald Trump likes just lying and making stuff up. And at the moment, he's obsessed with this fake story, this fake narrative that thousands of Ukrainian soldiers were encircled. They were trapped in Kursk, about to die. And only Donald Trump making that phone call to Putin saved the lives of these thousands of Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk. He won't shut up about it.
Tomorrow I'm speaking with President Putin of Russia to save some soldiers who are in deep trouble. They're captured. Essentially, they're surrounded by Russian soldiers. So I give you a lot of different things in one news conference, but it's a big deal. They're surrounded by Russian soldiers, and I believe if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't be here any longer. I was able to get them not to do anything at this moment. But it's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine is not good, but we're going to see if we can work a peace agreement, a ceasefire and peace, and I think we'll be able to do it. I'm speaking to President Putin tomorrow morning, yes.
Geez, Ukraine, why won't you say thank you that Donald Trump just saved thousands of Ukrainian soldiers' lives when they were encircled in Kursk? That's sarcasm, guys. So Janice Kluge speaks for me. This is a good tweet. Can we stop now with the ceasefire dreams? It's not going to happen. Because Russia doesn't want a ceasefire. Trump is a shitty negotiator. He has no cards, and he won't get anything done here either. Let's focus on how Ukraine can resist Russia on the battlefield without the help of the United States or Donald Trump. So we're getting movement. It's been over 3 years, Europe, but I think you're finally waking up, and this was a huge step. German parliament passes historic debt reform, paving the way for higher defense spending. Germany's Bundestag on Tuesday voted in favor of a major fiscal package with a vote of 513 in favor, 207 against. Basically, Germany had to amend their constitution to deficit spend in order to allocate hundreds of billions of dollars towards military defense spending. So the new chancellor of Germany, Merz, had to spend the last couple of weeks talking to all these coalition groups to get the supermajority. He needed 2/3, and it passed. Germany is going to militarily rearm. Now, I'm sure some of this money can be immediately used in the short term to help Ukraine in their own defense production. There's going to be deals made. I think Germany's activation and participation It's what we really needed the last 3 years, and it's finally happening. Concerning the other allies, the West can send troops to Ukraine without Russia's permission. This is the statement of French President Macron. I think this Oval Office debacle 2.5 weeks ago definitely lit a fire under French President Macron, and his language has been getting stronger. British Prime Minister willing to deploy troops to Ukraine indefinitely. The UK government is preparing a years-long military deployment in Ukraine alongside allies including France, Turkey, Canada, and Australia. But as more countries sign on to becoming peacekeepers in whatever a post-settlement agreement looks like, over 30 countries are now expected to contribute to the UK coalition of the willing. It's better than nothing, but if it's only 10,000, 20,000, or 30,000 troops, basically stationed hundreds of kilometers behind the front line, I don't know if this will actually deter Russia from breaking any kind of ceasefire if one occurs this year. I do want to share with you some of the words of French President Macron. This is a speech he gave the other day. Our shared commitment to the Ukrainian people has always been aimed at achieving a solid and lasting peace, a peace with robust guarantees that will protect Ukraine from any further Russian aggression and ensure the security of Europe as a whole. Canada and France are powers of peace and reliable allies who will work together in this effort. It is in this spirit that we will maintain our support for Ukraine and continue to demand clear commitments from Russia, and we will take all useful initiatives to move forward with our American, European, and international partners. We both stand for sovereignty and security, demonstrated by our unwavering support for Ukraine under your leadership. Canada will always be there to ensure Europe's security, to promote prosperous trade, to cooperate for peace, sustainable development, and universal rights with France throughout the world. This is the Prime Minister of Canada. He's new, but he feels the need to immediately go visit the United Kingdom and France because they have nukes. Because Donald Trump is threatening to invade and annex Canada right now. So for Canadians, it's now more important that international sovereignty of nations is respected, that Russia doesn't succeed in Ukraine. And we've been saying this, for the last 3 years, that this would embolden dictators to invade their neighbors. And I hate saying this, but if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, this will embolden Donald Trump to invade Greenland, Panama, Canada, maybe someday Mexico or Cuba, who knows? Donald Trump has a lot of territorial ambitions. And what are the Russians saying? Here's a tweet from Dmitry Medvedev. Macron and Starmer are playing dumb. Time and again they are told that peacekeepers must be from non-NATO states. No, we will send tens of thousands, just lay it out. You want to give military aid to the neo-Nazis in Kiev. That means war with NATO. Consult with Trump, scumbags. So I guess for Dmitry Medvedev, the only acceptable peacekeeping troops that could be sent to Ukraine would be Chinese, or Indian, or Iranian, or Belarusian. It's stupid, guys. They're not taking this serious. So I want to share this clip from friend of the channel, Anders Puck Nielsen. If you don't know him, you should subscribe to his YouTube channel. He is a Danish naval officer, and he is sounding the alarm. This is an important clip.
On one hand, we have to push towards Ukrainian victory. That is absolutely essential. As you know, I cannot see how Europe can balance Russia in the future without Ukraine. Ukraine is absolutely essential for European security after the United States is withdrawing here. So on the one hand, Europe has to push toward that. But at the same time, that is going to create, at least for a while, a more volatile situation where Russia will be willing to do dramatic things to turn things around.
Donald Trump is emboldening the Russians right now. The Russians believe they're getting away with this. And here's the map that Vladimir Putin is staring at. For all of my European friends, Russia wants back, under their direct control, all the territory that used to belong to either the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. And then they want their sphere of influence back. They want corrupt, pro-Russian, right-wing governments in charge of all of these countries. But why stop there? Why stop at just Eastern and Central Europe? In the age of the internet and information warfare, they can use social media to corrupt the democracies of every country in Europe, and they can just fund and prop up a corrupt right-wing governments in France and the United Kingdom and Spain and Germany and Italy or whatever. It's a decades-long project, but they're never going to stop. So for the last 3 years, Europe has had both Ukraine and the United States on their side to help defeat Russia. But the United States at best will remain neutral. And based on the statements of Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, they're not going to leave your democracies alone. MAGA with Russia are going to conduct information warfare operations in your countries, corrupt your democracies, and install fascist pro-Russian governments across Europe. And on top of it, if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, they will Russify the people, and it'll be ethnic Ukrainians dying on the front lines in meat assaults against the Baltics and against Poland and against Romania. This is what's been happening the last 3 years. These are Ukrainian children in the occupied city of Melitopol. And all day, every day, when they go to school, the only thing they learn is love for Russia and hatred of the West, as school children are pranced around in military uniforms, being forced to display patriotic displays of whatever to the dear leader Vladimir Putin. These are Ukrainian children in Melitopol being indoctrinated by masked men to hate the Baltics, hate Poland, hate Germany. And they're going to be used in 5 or 10 years to fight and die on the front lines for Vladimir Putin, to make Russia great again. It gets worse. Sorry, guys. Trump silences Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. This was breaking news in my video 2 days ago, but we've got more information. The Voice of America is being silenced. 1,300 journalists are now on leave as Trump freezes U.S. global media agency. Trump issued the executive order on Friday listing U.S. global media agency as among elements of the federal bureaucracy that the president has determined are unnecessary. Trump cuts to U.S.-funded media is putting reporters at risk. Reporters Without Borders is sounding the alarm over the risks facing USAGM staffers around the world, including 9 journalists currently imprisoned abroad for their work for democracy and the United States. The Trump administration is sending a chilling signal. Authoritarian regimes such as Beijing and Moscow now have free rein to spread their propaganda unchecked. He said the decision betrays the 9 U.S. AGM journalists who are currently jailed in Azerbaijan, Belarus, Myanmar, Russia, and Vietnam, and leaves thousands more jobless and in danger because of the previous work they did for America. Trump just betrayed all these people. Some of them are U.S. citizens. A lot of them are citizens of these dictatorships. And they thought America were the good guys. They went to go work for either Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Voice of America, to offer their expertise, knowledge, and language skills to reach the people of their home countries, people living in dictatorships, under oppression in China and Iran and Belarus and Russia. Radio Free Europe streamed unflinching coverage of Russia's war in Ukraine to Russians in the Russian language, when the Kremlin banned its citizens from even calling this special military operation a war. Radio Free Asia bravely exposed China's mass detention of Uyghurs, a predominantly Muslim ethnic minority in the far west of the country, because China is currently conducting a genocide. The Open Technology Fund helped fund the creation of Signal, the hugely popular encrypted messaging app. I use Signal. I also want to share with you thoughts from Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He's a Russian dissident that Putin jailed for 10 years. He's Russian. We're not US taxpayers, so it's not our place to say how they should spend their money, but it is impossible to ignore the role that Voice of America played for those searching for independent information. During the Brezhnev years, it was one of the few sources that offered an alternative to state propaganda, a rare glimpse of what a world with free press really looked like. Russian people relied on it, especially during times of crisis, like the war in Afghanistan when state media said next to nothing. Brilliant journalists work for Voice of America to this day, and it produces content that matters. It would be a shame to see it disappear completely. Maybe it evolves, becoming blogs, independent platforms, new media formats, but the need for independent information hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's more critical than ever. Here's thoughts from Robert Potter. Russia and China have their propaganda all over Twitter. Western social media is banned in China and Russia. Chinese-controlled TikTok and WeChat freely operate in the West, and the US is defunding Radio Free Asia, Europe, and Voice of America. The United States is losing the media war in a forfeit. We're just giving up. A beacon of democracy, EU looks to resume funding for Radio Free Europe. So the EU might find the funding themselves and keep Radio Free Europe going. Nothing about Radio Free Asia or Voice of America, but maybe at least one operation can be saved by the Europeans. But this is bigger. This is America's pro-democracy information warfare campaign all over the world. Trump has ordered the dismantling of the parent agency of the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, which oversees radio and television Marti, a Reagan-era effort to promote democracy and the free flow of information to communist Cuba. We're giving up on our pro-democracy, pro-capitalism information warfare against Cuba? Communist Cuba? It's a lot today, guys. So let's get Russia's reaction to Donald Trump dismantling America's pro-democracy information efforts around the world. Die, bastards. Russian propagandists celebrate Trump's closure of Radio Liberty and Voice of America. So what does Margarita Simonyon have to say? She's the head of RT News. Will there be support of the United States, setting Ukraine aside, his behavior, Donald Trump, and the behavior of his administration in other areas certainly fills us with optimism. You know this old saying, today is a holiday, the pioneers are rejoicing. I don't know the saying, this is a Russian saying. Lavrenti Pavlovich Beria came to visit us today. In the comments section, maybe you guys can explain who that is. Today is a celebration for my colleagues at RT News, Sputnik, and other outlets, because Trump suddenly announced he's closing down Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and Voice of America. They're now closed down. This is awesome. This is an awesome decision by Donald Trump. What's amusing is that as soon as this funding from the State Department was cut off, all independent media outlets have closed down. Yes, this is wonderful. How independent were you? How many people will now stand in line for the right to work washing the floors because they don't know how to do anything else? Several thousand of chronic slackers will now be searching for jobs. I'm addressing independent journalists. Die, animals. You are lying, nasty, and deplorable. You are traitors to the motherland. Die in a ditch. So these are Russian exiles he's talking to. People who fled Russia because they were going to be murdered or imprisoned for opposing Putin. And they believed in America. And they went to go work for Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. And all these people just lost their funding. They lost their jobs. And yes, the answer is they need to continue the work. They just have to do it on social media. And they have to find other sponsors and patrons to support their critical work. In just a few weeks, Trump has gutted our foreign economic aid programs, democracy promotion programs, and media organizations that provide news to people living under tyranny. Trump has given up trying to compete with powerful autocracies like China, Russia, and Iran. Why? Such a disaster for American foreign policy. It makes America weak again. In China, they only have state-controlled media. In Russia, they only have state-controlled media. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of the press. And America just lost all of their tools to counter that. Let's get to the bad news for Russia. Fire at oil refinery in southern Russia extinguished 3 days after a Ukrainian drone strike. But I guess there's now a ceasefire in effect, and Ukraine can no longer target these oil and gas facilities. Drones caused fire on fuel energy facility in Russia's Astrakhan Oblast. Ukraine's 1,400-kilometer drone strike on Russia's Ufa oil refinery proves no target is safe west of the Urals. Ukraine can just continue producing, continue planning, and as soon as Russia breaks the ceasefire, they can unload everything in a big, spectacular attack, but we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen the next couple weeks, guys. Ukrainian 28th Brigade defeats Russian armored column near Toretsk. So Ukraine is still doing perfectly well on the battlefield. The front lines are more or less stable. Russia occasionally takes a tree line or a wheat field, but nothing significant has happened in the last year almost. Kursk was a controlled withdrawal. Donald Trump, I'm convinced, applied pressure to force Ukraine to withdraw from Russia's territory, but that wasn't a defeat on the battlefield. Good news for Ukraine. Ukraine to get $3.5 billion from EU to stabilize their economy, rebuild, and modernize. This is the third tranche from that 50 billion euro package. Thank you so much, the EU, getting it done. Germany ships 22 mine-resistant vehicles and 1,500 artillery shells in the latest aid for Ukraine. This is nice, but not going to replace what America was providing. Germany's awake. The money is now there. There's going to be some big moves from Merz and the Germans this year. This is what we have to look forward to going into summer and fall. Final video I want to share with you guys. I mentioned Rebecca last week. She was running a fundraiser for some delivery drones. These are not FPV kamikaze drones. These are large drones that drop off food, water, and medicine to guys on the front lines. I mentioned her fundraiser. Lots of you donated. So she filmed this thank you video for us, and this is what Rebecca has to say to you, the viewer, and everyone who supported her fundraiser.
Hey guys, it's Becca, and I'm in one of my favorite places. I am in the workshop of my drone boys. And I wanted to make this video because I wanted to say a thank you, a huge thank you to everyone who helped out. I can't thank you guys enough. It was so crazy. I just started to get these pings on my phone the other day, and I said, what's going on? I started to see some donations coming in, and it turned out that Jake Bro had shared some of my video in his YouTube video, and the outpouring was like so amazing. And so I wanted to go over what we did with the money and kind of show you. I just want to give you a quick peek into what you guys' money went to. And these are our bigger drones that we're using to deliver aid. One of these drones can make 20 flights a day. These are humanitarian missions. And every single drop is food, water, medicine, and needed equipment for the guys. So listen, in the past, the FPV drones have been really talked about. And footage from both sides have circulated of these essentially suicide bombers going into targets, people, positions, vehicles. And my guys at this point are not using their drones as any kind of bombers. They're at the point where every single mission, every single flight, every single drone is being used to deliver humanitarian aid. That is all they do. They fly missions of hope. And so words cannot express how incredibly, incredibly grateful I am, and we are, to you guys for helping us be messengers of hope.
Thank you to everyone who supported Rebecca and continues to support Ukraine. Russia will be defeated. Brilliant people are working on this. It's going to happen. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.